Okay, on this video, I am going to discuss, analyze, and then destroy and obliterate the narrative of this man right here. He is the epitome of what we would call a Sambo or a Quimbo. And I say Sambo and Quimbo because to call black people like him and Uncle Tom is a misnomer. And it demonstrates that you don't know the story, Uncle Tom's Cabin, from which the term Uncle Tom derived. In the novel by Harriet Beecher Stowe, Uncle Tom's Cabin, Uncle Tom was actually the hero of the story. He was the polar opposite of this man. Uncle Tom was beaten to death by two black slaves by the name of Sambo and Quimbo at the behest of their white master by the name of Simon Legree, who also had purchased Uncle Tom. Uncle Tom was beaten to death at the hands of two black slaves who were like this man here, Sambo and Quimbo. And that's the term we should call people like him. He was beaten to death because he would not tell the massa, Simon Legree, where the two black women were who had ran away. They were escaping. This man would have told his white master exactly where they were. Sambo and Quimbo were given a little bit of wine and they were offered a little bit of change as a reward for helping to retrieve the two black women. Uncle Tom, that is, knew exactly where they were. He refused to tell them, and for that, he was beaten to death. He willingly gave his life to protect others. And because of Uncle Tom, all of the other slaves that were owned by his former slave owner, Mr. Shelby, they were all set free because of the fortitude and character demonstrated by Uncle Tom, who again gave his life to protect others. And he also stayed on the plantation. The reason he did not run off in the beginning of the story is because he knew that all of the slaves would be sold. So he elected to stay when another young lady ran off in order to keep her son from being sold along with Uncle Tom. But let's get into this Sambo right here, Jesse Lee Peterson. And please don't ever call him Uncle Tom again, because if you know the story, you'll realize that to call a black person like him and Uncle Tom, that is a supreme compliment. It's not an insult. Now, I'm going to play this video, and it's almost hilarious to see this white man getting frustrated and arguing and debating with this Sambo, Jesse Lee Peterson, who is promoting his ideology of white supremacy and black inferiority. This man right here, this black man, is a white supremacist. I wouldn't really necessarily have a problem with his rhetoric if it was based on fact. But it's not, and I'm going to demonstrate that. Unlike most of the rhetoric you'll find on YouTube, when people talk about race, they give opinions. And they basically repeat narrative that they've heard, whether or not it's based on fact or not. I'm going to soundly disprove everything this man says, which is very easy to do. But if you look at the commentary, it's very revealing. Particularly the commentary coming from whites who appear to be very happy to hear a black man talk about how superior white people are. And the basic narrative he's going to be discussing is this ideal. In fact, I'm going to let him say it. He can say it better than I can, because I can't say something like that without cringing. He says that white people create and black people destroy. Basically, black people don't create anything. I'm going to show why that is patently false as well. He also says that when black people move into a lovely neighborhood that white people created, black people quickly turn it into a ghetto. He's basically saying that property values go down, quickly you have gangs and drugs, even though statistically it is true, it is a fact. I've shown that on other videos, and it's always been a fact that the #1 drug users in the United States of all drugs, cigarettes, and alcohol are white people, and blacks are the least likely to use drugs. The only exception is Asian Americans, who use less drugs than everybody else, followed by black Americans, who are the second least likely to use drugs, smoke crack cocaine, use cocaine, heroin, LSD, any other prescription drug that you can think of illegally, or even to smoke cigarettes or drink alcohol. The only exception to that is that Native Americans, so-called Indians, they are more prone to be alcoholics and abuse alcohol than whites are, than anybody else is. Native Americans have the biggest problem with alcoholism, followed by whites. The race that is least likely to consume all illegal drugs, narcotics, and alcohol are Asian Americans. The second least likely are black Americans. It is a fact. So that is contrary to what some of the things this Sambo is going to say. He also is indicating, according to his white supremacist rhetoric, again, black people move into a lovely neighborhood that white people created, and very quickly it turns into a ghetto that nobody wants to live in, including the black people that live there. Now, it's interesting that this man resides in Los Angeles. I used to reside in Los Angeles. I still live in the general area, but Southern California, that is. But I'm very familiar with all of Southern California, particularly the most affluent parts of Southern California. And if this man resides in Southern California, he has to know that everything he's saying is completely false. When you think of an impoverished black community or a bad neighborhood that you don't want to live in, people always mention Compton, they mention Watts. I'm going to show you something about Compton and Watts as well. The truth of the matter is, I'm going to show the evidence that shows that not only is everything he is saying patently false, totally inaccurate, but it's even worse than that. The truth of the matter is, we're going to look at if what he has said was true, it seems like we should be able to find, and first of all, let me tell you this, there are 272 neighborhoods, distinct neighborhoods, 272 in Southern California. Out of those 272 neighborhoods, you would think that the one that is the most highly populated with black people would be the ultimate ghetto because it has the highest percentage of blacks. Now, if what this, it's hard for me to even call him a man. How about I say, if what this thing we're saying is true, that should be the place with the worst quality of life, the most graffiti, the most gangs, the most crime, the most illicit drug use, a place that nobody wants to live, and the property value should have plummeted. Let's take a look and see if that's true. But first, watch what this man has to say. I'll let him say it for himself. Okay, Jesse, you have the mic.
Are they? And they're called white supremacists. They're called all kind of bad names.
Well, white supremacists
Is it fair to white people to treat them that way after they have built the greatest country on this side of heaven and allow your mama to come here from Turkey?
Do you not think that black people played a significant role in building
You're not
this
answering
country?
my question. Is that fair to white
Say
people?
yes or no. Do you think black people did? Do you
Is
not think
that
that black
fair
people
to
played a
white
significant
people?
role?
Is that fair to white
Okay,
people?
there's no such thing. Like, there's no fairness to white people. This is not a white person's country. Asian people played a significant
They
role
didn't
in
build
building
this country.
Who built this country?
They left
Do
their
you not
country to
think?
come here.
Do you not think that black people played a significant role? Do you not think that African Americans played a significant role in building this country?
No.
How could you? Oh, okay. All right. Well, do you think white
Because-
people are better than black people? Let's
Better
get
in-
right to it. Do you think white people are better
Better
than black
in the
people?
sense that,
What, better in what sense?
I'm about to tell you, that they create and black people destroy.
Holy crap, dude. Oh my God. You have black employees.
Put a bookmark on that statement because I'm going to obliterate it. White people are better in the sense that they create and black people destroy. Remember that. Pretend that we're in court.
How do they sit here and listen to you peddle this garbage?
It's true.
What a garbage perspective, Jesse.
You think black people
There's no
better?
way you actually believe
So
this.
then
There's no way you're honest. If you think, as a black man, that white people are better because black people destroy,
In the sense that they build and black people destroy.
wait, how?
So let me ask you this. I have the proof.
You have the proof.
I have the proof.
Okay.
Sorry, Jesse, you don't have the proof. You have rhetoric that's been fed to you by your white supremacist masters. I have the proof. And I'm going to destroy everything you said without raising a sweat.
Have you noticed? You probably haven't noticed because we don't have statistics. But have you noticed that
We do have
white people will allow black people to come into their beautiful neighborhoods, and then the blacks will come, white people will leave, and the blacks, rather than keeping that going, they will destroy it? Have you noticed they tear it down rather than build on it? Have you noticed that?
Well, sorry, Jesse. Number one, you're wrong. We do have statistics, and I am going to show the statistics. You like to give platitudes. I'm going to give facts, which are incontrovertible. We absolutely do have the statistics. And for something like you, it is going to be shocking. I don't really think it's going to be shocking. I think you might know this as well as I do. You are a boot-licking, butt-kissing Sambo who, for whatever reason, likes to placate the insecurities of white people with your white supremacy rhetoric that comes out of a black mouth. And it's going to be very easy for me to destroy your position with facts.
No, I have not noticed what you're talking about.
You haven't seen statistics on that?
Statistics.
No, I don't know what you're referencing.
I'm saying people
I'm still
build.
in awe that you are like a real person who genuinely has this perspective. I thought this was just like Uncle Ruckus in the Boondocks. I thought this wasn't like a real fucking person. This is a real human being who genuinely has this perspective.
Do you notice that blacks create ghettos?
No, the government, the system creates ghettos.
So
Do you want to live in a ghetto? You're black. Do you want to live in a ghetto?
There's a system.
Do you want to live in a ghetto?
There's a system to live in
Does
a
anyone want to
ghetto.
live in a ghetto?
Who is the system?
The system is capitalism. It's the American political structure that consistently holds not just black people back, but all people back.
So are you
Black people
saying
back
that?
further than other people?
So you're saying that the system will not allow
Would you like to live in a ghetto?
Let me ask you this.
But
Are you saying
Why
that?
you've never answered my
No, I
question?
want to live in no ghetto.
Okay, exactly. But
But
then
let me
other
ask you
people
this.
want to live in a ghetto? No, they're not building ghettos.
Why don't they clean it up then?
It's not about like
They're not ghettos when they move in.
when you're a single mother.
Are they
And
ghettos when they
take care of
move?
your children. When
Oh my God.
a black child has 1 out of every 5 black child in this country has one parent that is currently incarcerated. That number is insane.
Wow, man,
And I
how
give
can
you-
I don't agree with this white man at all. He's overly placating the need that some blacks have to not be personally accountable. I get that. But I absolutely do not agree with Jesse Lee Peterson either. I do agree with some of what the white man is saying, but not all of it. There has to be personal accountability. I want you to know something. I am not Afrocentric. I am truth-centric. I will speak the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, the solitary truth, the unadulterated truth. So help me God, regardless of who feels some kind of way about it. And it just so happens that the truth is not on the side of Jesse Lee Peterson, who has the temerity, the audacity, the unmitigated gall to call himself a minister, a man of God. Anyway, I could show a bit more where he basically, well, he already said it. So he's either right or he's wrong. And we're going to look at Southern California because that's where he lives. And that's what he's talking about. And if what he's saying is true, there should be evidence of it. He says there are statistics. Well, let's look at it. First of all, this notion that whites create and blacks destroy. Let's see if that's true or not. I made a video that talked about the man who was, I was using that as a metaphor when I say this black man basically built Los Angeles. Okay? He was basically one of the most prominent architects in all of Los Angeles, and a lot of the landmarks, structures that are in LA today were designed by this black man. I have a video about that, and he also built some of the exclusive mansions and homes in the Hollywood Hills. Okay, but that's neither here nor there. I want to talk about, and I'm gonna go through this very quickly. Most of us know, at least most blacks know, the story of the Black Wall Street, which literally was built. He said, whites create and blacks destroy. There is not a single town, not a single town in all of history, today, yesterday, or any other time, that black people have destroyed. The Black Wall Street. There were over 70 towns built by blacks. When I say built, these were not towns, lovely towns that were that white people built. Black people moved into them, and then whites left, and the blacks destroyed them. No, these 70 towns around the same time. There were over 70 just in the one state of Oklahoma. That is a fact. There were a number of towns that were referred to as the Black Wall Street. We're going to talk about Greenwood, Oklahoma, which is what you see here, which is the one that gets the most attention. This town was literally built by blacks. After slavery, they were given land, and they purchased land. And they took land that was uninhabited. They literally built it from the ground up. And a lot of people would say today, wait a minute, you mean the blacks actually, they didn't just move into a white town, they actually built, yes, that means they created the infrastructure, they built the buildings, they paved the roads, they did everything. And for those of you who have a problem with that, that's because you're ignorant and don't know history. Let me ask you a question. If you had free labor in the forms of slavery, do you think that the only thing black slaves did was pick cotton? Who do you think was even building the white towns? So whether you wanted them to learn the skill sets necessary to build an infrastructure and a town or not, they did, because they had done it even when they were slaves. And many of the people who built the Black Wall Street were the descendants of slaves, or they were former slaves themselves, and they had all the skills, the ability, the knowledge, and everything they needed to build a town. And they did. And the Black Wall Street was second only to New York City in the entire United States as being one of the wealthiest and most productive and prosperous towns in the entire nation. They owned the bus companies, had airstrips when there were very few planes in the United States. They owned several planes, and there were several, not one or two, but there were several multi-millionaires back then, even when to be a millionaire was almost like being a billionaire today. And there were very few millionaires in the whole nation, but there were a number of them in the Black Wall Street. Very productive and prosperous. And you say that whites create and blacks destroy. You ignore the destruction destroyed by white people, and the majority of the black towns that we're talking about were destroyed by white people, and they were built by black people. So this narrative that whites create, which they do, that's a fact, but blacks destroy, is completely false. It's not supported by the facts, and the evidence clearly shows, again, there is not one single town ever in the entire United States that black people have destroyed, but there are dozens of towns that black people built, and I'm not even talking about towns that white people built and black people moved into them. The white people moved out, and then the whites came back and destroyed them. No. The whites never built them in the first place. The black people did. And they were literally destroyed. Bombed. Destroyed off the face of the earth. The same thing happened in Rosewood, Florida. It happened all over the United States. I'll make a video one day showing. I won't show all of them, but because there's just too many. There's too many. A lot of these towns that were destroyed, you don't even know they ever existed. We focus on one or two, but there were many. And the same thing repeated itself, and it was always for the same reason. White jealousy. White racism. Even back in the 60s, under Lyndon B. Johnson, they did a study, they did research, they had a project where they wanted to find out what was causing all of the rioting that was going on. And they had the intent to do an objective story to find out what was the root cause of it. And their conclusion, the conclusion of the United States government under Lyndon B. Johnson, that the root cause of all of the rioting and the death and destruction and the murder and the total obliterating of towns, which is what was happening, The root cause of it was white racism. They didn't say black racism or anything else. It was white racism and white jealousy, because how is it that these inferior subhuman people who have only recently been freed from slaves can literally build towns that not only rival ours, equal ours, but in many cases they are exceeding ours in their wealth and in their prosperity and in their success. Something we thought was impossible. So what do? If you can't beat them, we don't want to join them. We're going to destroy them. And that's what happened. But we're going to move past that and move to the modern era in order to counter Jesse Lee Peterson's rhetoric. We're going to deal with what's happening right now in Los Angeles, the city that he is from. Since he's from LA, we'll look at LA. Let's do that. So let's do this. First of all, before we get to the point about what's really happening today in so-called black neighborhoods, which is going to be shocking to some of you, let's take this look at this 1 minute and 35 cent, 35 cents, like $1.35. This 1 hour, I'm sorry, this 1 minute, oh my God, my head, my brain. This 1 minute and 35 second video, let's take a look at it.
Some African American communities are prospering, like the residents of Greenwood, a suburb of Tulsa, Oklahoma.
By the way, Greenwood, a suburb of Oklahoma, that is what was known as the Black Wall Street. Just so you know.
Here, former slaves were given land after the Civil War, and this rare footage shows the thriving town they built. A remarkable Baptist pastor named Solomon Sir Jones is the pioneering filmmaker. His footage was lost for more than 50 years. Jones captures the bustling life of Greenwood, which could be any American small town. But Tulsa's whites don't like what they see. In May 1921, after a black man is accused of assaulting a white woman, a white mob rampages through the city. For a night and a day, they loot and burn Greenwood. A Fox News crew captures the only surviving footage. It is the bloodiest racial massacre in American history, leaving nearly 300 dead.
And Jesse Lee Peterson says, whites create and blacks destroy. And completely ignores the historical truth, because it does not line up with his white supremacist rhetoric. Isn't that interesting? And some would have you to believe that rioting, looting, and burning is a black thing, when it is, in fact, the white racists who are most guilty of that in the past. And not one white town has ever been destroyed. Some of these black towns were literally destroyed off the face of the earth and taken off the map. And it is a historical fact that it is primarily because of white racism and jealousy and insecurity. And by the way, there are statistical data that shows conclusively, it's not a matter of opinion, it is a fact, that the race that has the lowest self-esteem of all, it's not whites, it's actually Asians. Second lowest self-esteem is white Americans. The highest self-esteem is black Americans. When you have high self-esteem, you're not so bothered by the progress and success of a race, because the facts and the truth counters your narrative of supremacy, when you have self-esteem and you are secure within yourself, you're not going to seek to destroy a people or oppress them just to alleviate your insecurity. No other race has ever done that other than the white race. And please don't make the mistake of thinking that I hate white people, because I do not. I am more like Uncle Tom. That's right, I am more like Uncle Tom. If you look at some of the, in fact, let me do this real quick. This is a segue. I don't want to get into a side issue. I'm a little bit long-winded, I realize that sometimes, but I think this is important. I think this is very important. I'm going to make an entire video about this subject because there's so much misunderstanding about it. I just want to show you the cover of the book for those of you who really don't know the story. You've just heard about it. Oftentimes they will show images like this. This black man holding a little white girl. And yes, he was a slave. And I realized that because a lot of black people, including those who watch my videos and follow my channel, you do have racist tendencies. And you have a problem with that automatically. And you have a problem with a black man like me saying he does not hate white people. I don't hate anybody. I hate ignorance and I hate ideologies. I hate actions. And I will act accordingly. My hatred is so strong. But to hate people because of what they are? Absolutely not. I mean, I hate them because of what they do and what they become, but not because of their race. And I just want to show you that on a lot of the covers, you might see this. And I think a lot of black people, because they were intellectually lazy, don't even know the story. They just see this on the cover. This black man who maybe he's reading to a white girl and he's a slave. And because he acted like he had feelings for the white family, that all of a sudden he was a sellout and hated black people and loved white people more than he did blacks. That's absolutely not true. I think the number one thing about Uncle Tom is that he was a man of God. And for that reason, he actually felt sorry for his white oppressors. But he did not hate them any more than I do. But anyway, let's get to the heart of the point. Let's take a look at Los Angeles. Since, according to this Sambo, Jesse Peterson, whites build and blacks destroy, even though I've already shown that to be false. We haven't destroyed any neighborhoods, but whites have destroyed entire towns. Yes, it's the past. We have to move on past that. We're going to look at the LA Times neighborhood map of all of LA County. And it looks at the 272 neighborhoods and gives you whatever data you want based on the demographics you are searching. We're going to find a neighborhood selecting by rank. And you can check by the age, by the crime, the ancestry, education, ethnicity. We're going to look at ethnicity. You can check by income, marital status, whatever you want. We're going to find the neighborhood that is the blackest of all neighborhoods. And according to Jesse Peterson, that should be a ghetto with the lowest property values, because black people drive the property values down. It should have the highest crime rate, the most gangs, the most illegal drug activity, the most graffiti, and everything else you don't want to be around. If this is true. Let's find this predominantly black neighborhood that is the blackest one of all and find out how big of a ghetto this place is. Okay, View Park, Windsor Hills is number 1. Gramercy Park is number 2. Leimert Park is number 3. Manchester Square is number 4. Baldwin Hills is number 5. Ladera Heights is number 6. Now, looking just at the top 6, I want you to understand something. First of all, let's look at the numbers. This is not wholly accurate simply because this is old data, but it hasn't changed that much. The main thing that has changed is that the property values are worth even more and the incomes are even higher. But looking at number 1, this should be the biggest ghetto out of them all, out of the entire city, showing 263 neighborhoods. This is number 1. 86.5% black. Ladera Heights is 71% black. All of these towns, these neighborhoods are majority black.